Hi there. As a born and bred New Englander, I'll admit my bias when I declare our Boston baked beans to be the greatest baked beans in the world. It's been a long-standing tradition here to sit down on a Saturday evening and enjoy a traditional dinner of Franks and Boston baked beans. But lately, I've discovered that this same recipe can be used in a manner somewhat less traditional to produce a huge pot of pulled pork and beans with the amount of pork actually equal to the beans, if not fully surpassing it. Most meat lovers will fall over themselves for a sandwich of barbecued pulled pork, but here we can use the recipe for Boston baked beans to produce a huge pulled pork shoulder with a taste that is truly unique. What's more, this dish will produce enough pork and beans to feed your entire gathering, whether you're having an office party, a cookout, or a potluck. You don't have to use as much as this, but here is about 2 pounds of dried Great Northern beans, and here is a 10-pound pork shoulder. You may want to use an especially huge pot for this one, so here is a vintage number 10 size 12-inch cast iron Dutch oven from the 1960s. Of course, if you're going to do this, be certain the pot will fit into the oven.
Preparing a pot of beans requires at least a full day of preparation since we have to soak the beans first. We fill a large bowl with enough water to cover the beans and have about an extra inch of water above the beans for them to expand. Cover the bowl and let the beans soak on your countertop for 12 hours. Don't put the beans in the refrigerator because the cold air in the fridge keeps the beans from softening. If the beans soak too long, they spoil and smell terrible, which is why a 12-hour soak works just about right. Now we prepare our Boston baked bean sauce, which we'll be using to marinate the pork shoulder as well as cooking the beans. After we begin soaking the beans, we mix together a sauce of brown sugar, molasses, kosher salt, ground black pepper, dry mustard, tomato paste, sugar, vinegar, and cloves. Most recipes for baked beans call for prodigious amounts of ketchup and Worcestershire sauce with the ingredients, and while I love Worcestershire, you don't need either of those in this dish. If you want, you could also use this as a decent barbecue sauce.
Now comes the fun part.
Next, we prepare the pork shoulder. Take a small but sharp knife, such as a paring knife, and cut several slits in the fat cap on the underside of the pork shoulder. This will help the marinade soak through the fat and into the meat. Pour about 1/3 of the bean sauce into the bowl and coat the entire pork shoulder with the sauce. Cover the bowl, place it in the refrigerator, and marinate the meat for several hours while the beans are soaking. The remaining bean sauce can also be stored in the refrigerator until the beans are ready. After a long soak, we're ready to begin slow cooking the pork and beans. I've learned from experience that the pot can overflow as it cooks, and so we prepare for this by placing a tray on the bottom rack of the oven. This will catch any liquid that boils over, and it helps keep from having to clean the oven afterwards. Preheat the oven to 260 degrees, and we prepare the last of our fresh ingredients. We chop and mince a large onion, then we slice up a ½ pound of bacon to flavor the beans. Spread the onions and bacon over your cooking pot, then add the rest of the bean sauce. Stir it all together, and then we add the beans to the pot. Once everything is mixed together, add enough chicken broth to cover the beans completely. Now it's time to create a thing of beauty. We sear the marinated pork shoulder in a heavy cast iron skillet. Sear all sides to brown the surface. Then we place the pork shoulder into the pot on top of the beans. Scrape the extra liquid out of the bowl and spread it over the top of the pork. We're now ready to cover the pot and place it in the oven. Now we slow cook the pot at 260 degrees for 9 to 10 hours. The pot did overflow a little, but we caught that on the tray. And now, at last, comes the second greatest moment of cooking our pork and beans. That's when we uncover the pot and reveal this. The extra fat can be scraped off the top of the pork, and you can use it for cooking at another time. The pork is so tender, the bones come right out with no effort at all. Don't try to lift the entire pork shoulder out of the pot because it would simply fall apart. Move it to a separate container and then simply shred it apart. You can then serve your guests a bowl of Boston baked pork and beans they won't soon forget.
Not only did the pork and beans turn out perfect, there's one other bonus. I happened to be cooking this pot overnight on one of the coldest New England winter nights we'd had in a few years. There's nothing like waking up in the morning to find your home filled with the wonderful aroma of well-cooked Boston baked beans, and the oven helped to keep my home warm all night too. It's a great way to start the day, and a breakfast of pork and beans will be more than enough to keep you warm for the entire day. I hope you'll give this New England tradition a try, and please let us all know how it turns out. Thank you very much for watching.